Most people spend their lives trying to be liked. They worry about being seen as polite, agreeable, harmless. They swallow their opinions, bend their boundaries, and mold themselves to fit whatever shape the world demands of them. And in that quiet sacrifice, they call themselves good. They convince themselves that this is what it means to be moral. But Marcus Aurelius would look at that kind of life and see something entirely different. He would see a person who has traded their integrity for approval, who mistakes fear for virtue, and who lives more as an actor on a stage than as a human soul capable of reason and strength. Marcus Aurelius never told anyone to be nice. Niceness, in the modern sense, is a performance. It is the art of avoiding discomfort. It is the habit of choosing peace at any cost, even when that peace is a lie. Niceness is about being seen as good. Virtue is about actually being good. And these two things almost never walk together. Marcus wrote that we must be satisfied with acting according to your own nature and fulfilling whatever duty lies before you. He did not tell us to fulfill what others expect, but to fulfill what reason and conscience command. Virtue requires clarity, courage, and the willingness to disappoint people who prefer a comfortable lie over a difficult truth. The person who chooses niceness over virtue becomes a hostage of approval. Every smile becomes a negotiation. Every act of kindness is contaminated with fear. You start to wonder, what will they think of me if I say no? What will they think if I speak the truth? What will they think if I choose what I know is right? And so you stay silent, you shrink, you obey. You soften your edges until you no longer recognize the shape of your own character. Marcus Aurelius warned about this when he wrote, "It is possible to be completely unphilosophical and still keep your soul pure, your character upright, your word honest. But to do that, he insists, we must stand firm, and firmness is incompatible with this compulsive desire to be pleasing. There is a dangerous illusion in trying to be nice. You begin to imagine that avoiding conflict is a sign of maturity. You think that meeting every request is kindness. You think that self-erasure is love. But Marcus Aurelius saw conflict not as something to run from, but as something to face with reason and calm. He believed that the obstacles placed before us exist to test our virtue, not to frighten us into submission. If you run from every discomfort, you never become the person you are meant to be. You become a reflection of everyone else's desires. Virtue, for Marcus, is not passive. It is not soft. It is not about pleasing. It is about alignment. Your actions with your principles, your words with your truth, your choices with your highest nature. Virtue is the strength to refuse what is wrong, even if the refusal upsets someone. It is the courage to say yes to what is right, even if the world stands against you. It is the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to be approved to feel whole. Marcus wrote, "If you act rightly, do not concern yourself with whether you are praised." And this is the heart of the Stoic message. You cannot control what others think of you, so why build your life upon it? There is a moment in every person's life when they must decide whether they will stand for themselves or fold into the demands of others. If you live for praise, you will chase it forever. If you fear disapproval, you will be controlled by anyone willing to withhold it. Niceness becomes a leash, and every person you try to please becomes a hand that holds it. Virtue, however, frees you. It lets you walk your path with dignity. It lets you say no without guilt, speak honestly without shame, and carry yourself without needing the world to confirm your value. Marcus Aurelius never aspired to be liked. He aspired to be just. He aspired to act with wisdom, restraint, and compassion, not because it made people admire him, but because it made him worthy of admiring himself. That is why he wrote, "The approval of the many is worthless." Not because people are worthless, but because their approval is unstable, often ignorant, and rarely aligned with what is truly good. To build your identity on such a foundation is to build a palace on sand. Be virtuous, not nice, is more than a slogan. It is a return to the Stoic ideal of character over comfort. It is the reminder that goodness without strength is only a mask, and that the person who never risks being disliked never discovers who they truly are. To understand what Marcus Aurelius meant by virtue, you must first understand what he refused to become. He refused to be driven by impulse, by emotion, by the hunger for validation, or by the fear of rejection. He refused to allow his life to be shaped by the opinions of the crowd, and he refused to perform goodness for applause. This refusal is not arrogance. It is clarity. It is the recognition that a life governed by the shifting tides of praise and criticism is not a life at all, but a constant act of self-abandonment. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value, Marcus reminds us, if none of them know anything about the subject. How many times have you bent yourself out of shape for the approval of people who do not even understand your struggles, your principles, or your path? How often have you treated their judgments as commandments, when in truth they are nothing but noise? Niceness thrives on that kind of noise. Niceness is the silent agreement to let the world decide who you are. Virtue demands the opposite, that you know who you are, and that you hold to it even when the room grows cold. Marcus Aurelius believed that a person must become a fortress within themselves, not impenetrable to the world, but firm enough that the winds of public opinion cannot knock them down. Niceness makes you a reed. Virtue makes you a tree. One bends with every breeze, the other stands through every storm. When Marcus writes about being straight, not straightened, he is talking about this inner independence, this refusal to become a puppet of other people's expectations. But this independence is not cruelty. It is not harshness. Marcus Aurelius was not encouraging people to become cold or aggressive. He was urging them to act from reason rather than fear. Niceness is rooted in fear. The fear of disappointing, the fear of conflict, the fear of being misunderstood. Virtue is rooted in strength, the strength to seek what is right rather than what is easy. When you choose virtue over niceness, you do not become less kind. You become more genuinely kind, because your kindness is no longer a disguise for your insecurity. It becomes an expression of your character, not a strategy for survival. Think about how many times you have said yes when every part of you wanted to say no. Think about the resentment you swallowed, the frustration you buried, the hours you gave away, the boundaries you dissolved, all because you did not want to be seen as difficult. Marcus Aurelius would tell you that these sacrifices do not make you good, they make you fragmented. They scatter your attention, dilute your strength, and teach you to betray yourself in small, silent doses. He wrote, "A person's worth is measured by the worth of what they value. If you value being agreeable above being honest, your life will reflect that. You will agree your way into exhaustion. You will please your way into bitterness. You will smile your way into invisibility. There is a particular kind of suffering that comes from living as a nice person. It is the suffering of being misunderstood because you never speak your truth. It is the suffering of being underappreciated because you never assert your needs. It is the suffering of being taken for granted because you never set boundaries. People cannot respect a version of you they have never met. Niceness hides your real thoughts, your real feelings, your real principles. Virtue reveals them. Virtue allows you to speak clearly, to act decisively, to stand for something even if that stance is not applauded. Marcus Aurelius did not ask the world's permission to live by his principles. He simply lived by them, and he accepted the consequences with serenity. There is a quiet power in refusing to play the role that others assign to you. When you stop performing niceness, you start showing the world your actual self. Some people will dislike it, some will resist it, some will test it. But Marcus Aurelius would remind you that their reactions are outside your control. What is inside your control is the consistency of your character. What is inside your control is the discipline to act with justice, with clarity, with courage. What is inside your control is the ability to remain true to yourself, even when others misunderstand you. When you choose virtue over niceness, you stop asking, "How do I make everyone happy?" And you begin asking, "What is the right thing to do?" This shift is the beginning of freedom. It liberates you from the impossible task of managing other people's emotions. It liberates you from the exhausting responsibility of maintaining an image. It liberates you from the invisible chains of approval. Marcus understood that inner peace does not come from the absence of criticism, but from the presence of integrity. He did not seek a life free of judgment. He sought a life free of self-betrayal. And that is the heart of the Stoic message. You cannot live well by being nice. You can only live well by being virtuous, by being honest, by being steady in your values. If you want to be admired, be nice. If you want to be free, be virtuous. There comes a point in every life when you realize that being nice has not protected you. It has not kept people from hurting you, from misunderstanding you, from using you, or from walking away when it suited them. Niceness promises safety, but delivers exhaustion. And the more you try to be nice, the more you notice that people sense the weakness beneath it. Not because you are weak in essence, but because you are hiding behind an inauthentic softness, one that Marcus Aurelius would immediately recognize as the opposite of virtue. Marcus knew that people respect clarity more than they respect comfort. They may resent someone who speaks the truth, but they trust them. They may get angry at someone who sets boundaries, but they remember them. They may feel unsettled by someone who refuses to be controlled, but they cannot ignore them. A person who chooses virtue over niceness stands in a way that the world must eventually acknowledge. They do not radiate aggressiveness or superiority. What they radiate is solidity, an internal alignment that does not tilt with the shifting moods of others. Niceness, by contrast, creates confusion. A nice person says yes when they mean no, agrees when they disagree, smiles when they are uncomfortable, and hides resentment beneath politeness. The world does not know where such a person stands, because they themselves do not know. Marcus Aurelius warned against this fragmentation. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Niceness is built entirely on that faulty estimate, the belief that approval is essential for your well-being, and disapproval is a threat to your existence. But what if you stop estimating approval as something valuable? What if, like Marcus, you begin to see it as irrelevant? The moment you stop receiving approval as nourishment, you stop starving for it. And when you stop starving for it, people lose their power to manipulate you. You become less reactive, less dependent, less anxious about how you are perceived. You begin to live from the inside outward, not from the outside inward. Marcus Aurelius lived in a palace, but spent his nights reminding himself that he needed nothing except the strength of his own character. Imagine the freedom in that, the freedom of knowing that your peace does not depend on anyone's permission. And yet, many people confuse virtue with harshness. They imagine that if they stop being nice, they will become cruel or indifferent. But Marcus Aurelius teaches the opposite. Virtue is not a withdrawal of compassion, it is a purification of compassion. When you no longer act out of fear, your kindness becomes cleaner. You help because it is right, not because you want to be liked. You forgive because it is noble, not because you are afraid of losing someone. You speak gently because you respect the humanity of others, not because you want to avoid confrontation. Virtue transforms kindness from a defensive strategy into a deliberate choice. Niceness drains you. Virtue shapes you. Niceness requires no reflection, no courage, no moral backbone. But virtue demands that you examine yourself, question your motives, and act according to principles even when those actions come with a cost. Marcus Aurelius wrote constantly about discipline of thought, of emotion, of desire. He believed that if a person cannot control their need to be liked, they cannot control anything. That dependency becomes a chain that others can pull whenever they wish. But virtue cuts that chain. It restores your sovereignty. You may lose people when you begin to live virtuously. The ones who benefited from your passivity may pull away. The ones who mistook your niceness for weakness may resist your change. But Marcus would say that this loss is not a tragedy, it is a clarification. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." So when certain people fall away because you have become firmer, more principled, more honest, that loss is not an impediment. It is the advancement of your life. It is the pruning of what never belonged. And something unexpected happens when you stop trying to be nice. Your relationships improve. Not because everyone suddenly agrees with you, but because the connections that remain become cleaner, truer, and built on respect instead of hidden resentment. Virtue attracts those who appreciate depth and truth. Niceness attracts those who appreciate convenience. Marcus Aurelius admired those who lived with dignity, not those who lived for applause. He believed that the person who stands alone in their integrity stands with the universe. Live not as if you were destined for 1,000 years, he warns. In other words, do not waste your short, fragile existence polishing an image for others to approve of. Let them misunderstand you. Let them disagree. Let them judge. Your task is not to manage the minds of others, but to refine your own. To be virtuous is to live with purpose. To be nice is to live with fear. And fear has never led a person to greatness. When you choose virtue, you reclaim your time, your energy, your identity. You rediscover the voice you silenced to keep the peace. You relearn the power of saying no. You remember that the only approval that matters is the approval of your own conscience. And in that moment, the quiet authority Marcus Aurelius carried begins to grow within you. Not the authority of domination, but the authority of someone who lives without pretending. There is a kind of peace that only arrives when you finally stop apologizing for your existence, when you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, when you stop hiding your principles to avoid being judged. This peace is not loud, it is not dramatic, it does not require anyone's approval to exist. It grows quietly inside you the moment you decide to live by virtue instead of niceness, by truth instead of performance, by the firmness that Marcus Aurelius spent his life cultivating. Marcus understood something that most people never discover. You do not need to be liked to live a good life. You need to be disciplined. You need to be honest. You need to be committed to what is right. And you need to be free from the desperate hope that other people will validate you. It is not the man who has too little, he wrote, but the man who craves more, who is poor. If you crave approval, you remain spiritually poor, no matter how much praise you collect. But if you crave virtue, if you hunger for strength of soul, then you begin to understand what it means to live with dignity. To live virtuously is not to become rigid or unkind. It is to stop bending your principles for comfort. It is to stop pretending. It is to stop allowing the world to dictate the shape of your character. And in a culture that encourages people to be anything as long as they are pleasant, choosing virtue becomes an act of subtle rebellion. It is the refusal to sell your integrity for acceptance. It is the refusal to live shallowly just to be admired. It is the refusal to lose yourself in exchange for belonging. Niceness dissolves your identity. Virtue restores it. And as you begin to walk this path, something else happens. You start to see the difference between relationships built on weakness and relationships built on strength. The people who only valued you because you never disagreed, never resisted, never asserted yourself, they will drift away. They relied on your silence. They relied on your compliance. They relied on the version of you that existed to keep them comfortable. Marcus Aurelius would not see their departure as a loss, but as a sign that your life is finally aligning with truth. When he said, "Let men see, let them know, a real man lives here," he meant that your presence should reflect your inner character, not a curated mask meant to avoid discomfort. As you let go of niceness, you begin to feel the solid ground of your own values beneath your feet. You learn to say no without guilt. You learn to express your needs without apologizing. You learn to speak truth without wrapping it in layers of self-doubt. And the people who remain in your life, the ones who respect your boundaries, who value your mind, who are strong enough to stand beside someone who does not betray themselves, those people become the foundation of your new environment. Marcus believed that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When your thoughts are rooted in truth rather than fear, your relationships start to reflect that same authenticity. In the end, the path of virtue is not glamorous. It is not designed to attract applause. It is often quieter, lonelier, and more demanding than the path of niceness. But it is the only path that leads to real self-respect. The world will try to convince you that approval is essential for happiness. Marcus Aurelius insisted that only character is essential. He lived surrounded by power, pressure, expectation, and judgment, and yet he returned to the same truth again and again. You cannot control what others praise or condemn. You can control only the direction of your own soul. So choose the direction carefully. Choose the direction that makes you stronger, not safer. Choose the direction that makes you clearer, not more agreeable. Choose the direction that leaves your conscience clean, even if it leaves some people disappointed. Niceness will give you a life of temporary comfort. Virtue will give you a life of meaning, one that is grounded, steady, and unshakable. And when the day ends and you look at yourself without the noise of the world surrounding you, you will know that you did not perform your life. You lived it. That, Marcus Aurelius would say, is the only kind of victory worth pursuing.